go. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is weird. I'll try to get this adjusted just right. But welcome. As Christine mentioned, a funny story that I just kind of realized today was I came to the Devil's Gate talk 4 years ago tonight in October, right after I found out I was eligible for retirement. I talked to Cindy Neely right over there in that corner, told her I was going to be retiring. I got a call on Saturday morning saying, I have a job for you. And I went down to her place and she handed off a big book and binder and stuff. And that's how I took over that responsibility, which is an amazing one to be involved with here in the Historic Landmark District. But tonight I'm going to talk about geology. Can everybody hear me, or I'm not quite sure how it sounds on this end?
Don't worry about that.
Okay.
You want us to turn it down a bit?
Well, for me,
Okay. Move it a little bit. It's a pretty short leash.
yeah.
Yeah, you could put, if
Um,
you wanted to just, if you want to put it on your shoulder, it'll just hang down and you don't have to have it
I
quite
just
as.
wanted to give the feedback.
I think you'll be okay as long as it doesn't point.
And usually I do a lot of standing. How does that sound? Um, but unfortunately I had a little bit of a tumble off my mountain bike on Tuesday, so got some bruised ribs, so it's easier for me to sit and talk. So thanks so much for the microphone. It works out great. But what I'll cover tonight is what geological events led to the landscape that we see here in the Georgetown Valley. Um, my first time coming here was exactly 40 years ago this spring. I was on a geology field trip. I have a geology degree from the University of Illinois. I grew up in Illinois with my wife. We got married while going to school there. But in 1983, I came out and signed up for a class called the Geology of the Colorado Rockies and the Colorado Plateau. And being somebody from Illinois that had never really seen mountains or anything, it was like, this is such an amazing class. And then there's a field trip. And you get to hike the Grand Canyon and you get to go through the Colorado Rockies. So we came out and left on a Friday morning, hit a snowstorm out in Goodland. This is in March, spring break. Um, Woke up in the morning here in Denver, or down there in Denver. Drove up to the geology overlook at Morrison, the hogback, and we all stood there at the hogback looking down at the procession of cars coming up I-70 with ski racks on them. At that time, most I'd ever skied was about 250 feet of vertical on the banks of the Mississippi River up in near Galena, Illinois. Um, does anybody know Chestnut Mountain? Okay, that's where I learned how to ski. So just sitting there watching all the cars, and I don't remember too much of that geology, but I did later become, when I moved here, a volunteer at Dinosaur Ridge, so I did get all that geology down at a later time. But driving on up I-70, we stopped at the Empire Junction, talked about the geology there, I'll touch on there. And it was just so neat after seeing all these slides that the professor had and was showing to see all this stuff in real life. So, and really get an idea of how the Colorado Rockies were formed, and then how glaciers worked. And that was just something that was totally amazing to me. I was lucky to be in the car. There was a woman in the car that was getting her geology degree also, and she was from Denver. And so I was lucky to be sitting next to her, and I remember her pointing out Torrey's Peak, that quick glimpse you get at it from Bakerville exit, and then just after seeing all the skis, then seeing Loveland Ski Area, and ski runs going all the way up before entering Eisenhower Tunnel, and then on over to the western slope. But that's where my real fascination with this area came from. So hopefully tonight I'll share that, and then hopefully you'll be able to look around and say, oh yeah, that's why that's this way by the end of the evening. So why we see what we see here. Mountain uplift, the Colorado mineral belt. That's why a lot of people came here because of the minerals, the gold and the silver. Glaciation that happened fairly recently compared to these other um, events. And one thing I did find out about this group, I've done two other talks previous to this, one on the centennial of the National Park Service in 2016, and then one shortly after the total eclipse, kind of contrasting the eclipse that happened here in the 1880s to the one that the Great American Eclipse that cut across just north of here. Um, but what I found out is that people like jokes, so I put a few in here. So what did one mountain say to another? That's a good one. This isn't funny, it's hilarious. So, and the second thing I noticed you guys really liked were quizzes. So when it comes to mountain uplift, how many times did the Rocky Mountains rose? One time? Two times? Or zero times? It's just always been this way. Any guesses? Um, Actually, it's lifted twice. There was the ancestral Rocky Mountains that lifted in about 312 million years ago. Those eroded over time. Then we had, the infamous, well, excuse me, this next point here is called about the ancestral Rockies. Those totally eroded. And then the inland sea formed through the mid part of the continent. And that's all the information you can find out down at Dinosaur Ridge. And then the current Rockies rose about 80 to 70 million years ago. And when I took the class, I'm like, this whole ancestral Rockies thing I never really got. And actually, I got it a lot better just doing the research and putting things together and photos for this presentation. But this is what it kind of looked like. Um, you can see kind of Colorado there. There's this real nice, whoops, there, here, laser pointer. Colorado is right there. And there's the border of Colorado. And there was a pretty good uh, set of mountain ranges, Basin Range mountains, kind of in the area where Colorado is now. These were nearly as high as what the current Rocky Mountains look like. Um, they were totally eroded, as I mentioned previously, and their sediments filled up these huge basins up to thousands of feet thick of sandstone and shale. And after about 50 million years, that's how long it took them to erode. And then all those sediments, basically sandstone and shale, were deposited in these mountains, or in these mountain basins. So here's kind of a satellite version. I found these online. You'll see these a couple times. But this kind of shows what the ancestral Rockies look like. I think these are pretty helpful just to see. Um, there's a geology site online about Colorado history, and I found that and was able to convert these. But you can see Denver there. It's important because I'll point it out here in a little bit. Aspen and the Maroon Bells. The Maroon Bells kind of set in a basin area there, as well as Denver and some of the central area there now. So, and here's another look at what 312 million years ago looked like. This is down in what would be Colorado Springs area now. With
Okay, that's cool.
And that would be the area there, kind of where Pikes Peak is now, but these are mountains that are long gone, and the Pikes Peak came up afterwards. So again, those mountains totally eroded and turned into red rock. So how do we know what the ancestral Rockies were about and where they were, and what some of the evidence and current evidence is. Um, red rocks, the fountain formation that forms red rocks is part of those ancestral rocky deposits that filled in those basins. Um, and then also when you'll drive around, this is another thing you'll kind of discover now after listening to this talk, is you'll see these red rocks popping up in a lot of different places. Anybody know where this is? Nope. That's actually on the top of Red Hill Pass in South Park. So anytime you hear the term Red Hill or Red something or Red Cliff, um, my wife and I just drove over Shrine Pass a couple weeks ago during the Aspen and had never taken that road but drove into Red Cliff, and those red cliffs over there are part of that. These are actually some rocks on top of Vail Pass. So all these red rocks were sometimes uplifted to the top of where the current Rockies are. But then, the biggest of that is the maroon bells, and you can see the sediment layers in that. That's all those eroded layers from those ancestral Rockies that now form the maroon bells. And they're thousands of feet thick because they sat in that basin there on the edge of the ancestral Rockies. So you guys getting an idea of those ancestral Rockies? We'll move on to the next thing. Okay. This is the Great Inland Sea, which is always a joke in the Park Service because so many park interpretive signs always talk about the Great Inland Sea. And so, no matter where you go, you see these little waysides that talk about the inland sea. But that was along the central part of the United States, stretching all the way from the Gulf of Mexico, what's now the Gulf of Mexico, up to the Arctic Ocean. And over time, lots and lots of rocks were deposited down in that basin. And that's what's actually become the Denver Basin, a lot of those rocks now. So the local climate was much warmer at that time, very subtropical all the way up to Wyoming. There was subtropical. And we can tell that by looking at rocks there. You find crocodile skeletons and such at Dinosaur Ridge, and you can tell that the climate was a lot warmer now. And actually the whole world was warmer because this is about the same period that they find the paleontological evidence of dinosaurs on Antarctica. So there was no ice on Antarctica. It was animals down there as far as dinosaurs go. The Western Interior Seaway formed about 120 million years ago, and the last we saw of it was about 60 million years ago when it dried out. And as it dried out, the temperature of the Earth got cooler, and the hypothesis is that a lot of that water that created these overland oceans and seaways are now held in those ice caps that are the Arctic and Antarctic ice caps and the Greenland ice cap. Okay, grandpa joke time. What did the sea say to the land? Nothing. Okay. I knew I'd get response. The second mountain uplift happened about 70 to 80 million years ago, and that's called the Laramide mountain uplift. And due to the low angle, see if my little pointer works there. Yeah, there it is. Very low angle of subduction of the Pacific plate underneath the North American plate, and that's a whole nother lecture if you want to have plate tectonics. But if you know about that, this Pacific plate slid underneath the North American plate there at the low angle, so it created actually the Rocky Mountains that are several hundred miles in from the coast. And then that also kind of led to some of the intrusions that we see as far as the mineral belts that I got a couple of slides about here in a little bit. But the Rocky Mountains are extremely far inland for a mountain chain, and they're also very wide. Uh, Most of the time you have subduction mountains right along the coast, the Cascades, or you have mountains where two plates have collided, like the Himalaya mountains with the India plate colliding against the Asia plate. So, more cool animation for Christine.
I love this.
So this is a satellite view of what had been a satellite 60 million years ago looking southwest to the northeast corner of Colorado. And these are kind of the mountains ranges. It says the Needle Mountains. That's what's become the San Juans um, over time. But just kind of to give you a perspective of all the different mountain ranges here in Colorado during the first uplift. And I promised you the Colorado Mineral Belt. And this is one thing I remembered seeing in class during the lecture, and I just found it really pretty amazing that there was just this band of minerals across Colorado where all the mining towns are. So you can start just outside Boulder where some of the mining starts, and you can go diagonally toward Telluride going through Central City, Idaho Springs, here in Georgetown, crossing the Argentine Pass and the mines that are all up there. You can follow it all the way to Montezuma, Breckenridge, Alma, over to Leadville, and then it all follows on down there through to Aspen and or Telluride and Aspen in that area, down here in the southwest part of the state, all the way down um, to just outside Durango. And this mineral belt was really caused by a shear zone that was actually been around for quite a while, but actually was kind of emphasized by that plate sliding underneath there, and it allowed for this intrusion of mineral-rich rock to flow up through the Rockies and get exposed. So that's why there's a lot of mining along that Colorado mineral belt, and you hear about it. You will notice that there is this area, Cripple Creek, that sits out of here. That was followed by some of the intrusion because Pikes Peak is kind of its special case of geologically as a mountain and an uplift plutone and carrying mineral-rich rock up around it. And there's some other examples of things that just kind of lay outside of it. But by far the majority of Colorado mines and minerals lie within this mineral belt. So, did miners come to Georgetown for gold or silver?
Both.
Oh, okay. But you're not. You've already lectured on this. I put this one in here for you. But yeah, they came looking for gold, but they stayed for the silver. The Griffith brothers headed up um, from Idaho Springs area in 1859. I hope I'm getting these dates right. I know I have this person right next to me.
Could
I
be
knew.
going, no,
No. Correct me anytime. 1859, and then silver was later discovered in 1864 and became very profitable after they figured out the process to mill it, right?
Yep. They actually found it in 1859 and 60, but they didn't
Know
want
what
it.
to, yeah, they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
There's a similar thing, story at Leadville
Yeah.
that I've read. So on to glaciation. Um, this is kind of the final extent of glaciers around 26,000 years ago, which is really recent in geological times. There's been at least 6 major glaciations. I'm sorry I told Phil 7. I have 6 here in my notes. Over the last 700,000 years, so the glaciers advanced down, pulled back up, advanced back down the mountains, came back up. Furthest extent of them, um, I think it was like 23 miles down from the crest of the Rockies down into the valleys. Um, One of the cool things about it, and I'll have a little bit more slides on it now, but I have my notes here about it, is these moraines that are located, they're called terminal moraines, which are kind of the moraines that are at the end of where the glaciers are. And actually, the glaciers kind of finished right at Empire Junction. So if you drive at Empire Junction, and I was looking again yesterday when I was coming up with my brother, and you look up underneath some of those bridges and stuff, you see all these big boulders. And they were pointed out to me on that geology trip by Dr. Langenheim that that's terminal moraine, and they CDOT used that for the construction of that interchange between I-70 and US 40. So you'll see that, and that's kind of where the glacier's final extent was. And I have some animations here to show that a little bit. This one here is about 20,000 years ago up to about 13,000 years ago. And this is actually the Gore Valley. They didn't, unfortunately, the people who put it together didn't do a Clear Creek County version of this. But, and actually it's labeled on there near Vale, and it's not Vale because that's Silverthorne. Yeah. But they hired some contractor to do it.
It's the greater veil.
Yeah. So, and you can see here now as the glaciers retreated up to kind of where currently they are now. I think that's kind of cool to watch. So, there were no large ice sheets here in the Rocky Mountains like what I was used to learning about in my geomorphology classes in Illinois, where we had continental glaciers from the Wisconsin time that came down and covered up most of the state and gave us all that great soil back in the Midwest. All the mountain valleys here had glaciers come in and out and come in and out. And actually I was sharing, unfortunately Cindy's not here, I haven't been had a chance to tell her. I was working with somebody from the Forest Service, an archaeologist, and he was showing me some points from about 13,000 years ago he found up in the Argentine Basin. And I was asking him about that, and I go, well, wasn't it covered with ice? And he goes, no, it moved back and forth. And actually, there's some, and you probably know about, there's documented run sites up there in the Argentine Basin. But it was amazing just to see some of that geology. I had a picture of it in his hand, and I'm sure he left it up there on site. But there's a long history of people up in high up into the mountains, which I didn't realize until I started doing a little bit of research to this. Thought, oh, there was all ice and snow here. They probably didn't come up this way, but nah, archaic folks traveled up here. So, and there have been at least 3 minor ice age advances in the Rockies over the past 5,000 years. And none of them had ice advance more than about 2.5 miles. No. So here I get to show some of my Google Earth skills and my PowerPoint skills. But does anybody know where this is at?
You're above Empire.
Yeah, above Empire Junction, looking south toward the Georgetown Valley.
Used
And
to be a great view from the Peck House.
yeah. And here you can see it's Bierstadt and Evans and Grays and Torreys on this side, and Big Glacial Valley here. I'll show you a little bit more about that. But what did that look like during glacial time? And I actually just kind of stumbled upon this photo way long ago, and I'm like, I'm going to use this for a slide sometime. So this is kind of what it would look like, covered with ice. And this is recent glaciation in Alaska, pretty current picture. I'm sure they've receded quite a bit in the glaciers in Alaska over the last 20 years. But if you want to see that again in slow-mo, we'll melt them away, and there's your Georgetown Valley and Empire Valley. And what's, oh God, this just went out of my head. Bard Creek, yes. And then on up Guanella Pass Road. And we'll bring the glaciers back one more time because this is so cool. And melt them out again. So, and if you kind of wanted to look what the geology. Here's one last animation of woolly mammoths. Um, and this is Highlands Ranch area, which recently there have been lots of mammoth fossils found in that area as well as camels. And that's Mount Blue Sky, no, Mount Evans, possibly Blue. Yeah, we had a conversation about that today. But they're behind that view that you kind of see from there. Oh, no, I got one more joke. Why did the woolly mammoth go extinct? They became irrelevant.
Is this a Park Service joke line?
Rangers do a good job of it. I've never been a good ranger. My wife, or excuse me, not my wife, my daughter back there is a ranger. Um, she doesn't have a good at jokes though. V-shaped valleys versus U-shaped valleys, and this was really a eye-opener thing that I learned about during that field trip. And anybody that's stuck in the car with me on the drive up I-70 gets to hear the lecture, the geology lecture. V-shaped valleys are cut by rivers. U-shaped valleys are cut by glaciers. This is looking down back east from Empire Junction, and there's your V. And there's looking south from Empire Junction. You do know you're driving south, right?
Yes.
And if you need more evidence, I got it later on in a really great picture. And there's your U-shaped valley. And there's another U-shape. So every time you drive up there, you should see these things now. And actually that was kind of the definition. And I'm not sure if it's the technical definition, but it's the one my geology professor used between the high country and the foothills. Where the glaciers ended was the high country, and where the V-shaped valleys are kind of defined as the foothills, at least along the Front Range. So, and hopefully I got the date right on this. What, 1890?
Yep.
Yeah. I found this picture because I thought this was pretty cool because it's like, oh, you can kind of see the U-shaped valley, here, but man, Georgetown's really flat through here, and why is that? And that created a really good opportunity for people to build a town here, especially when there was no trees left because they used them all for the mining shafts and the structures. Um, so when you drive into the Georgetown Valley, you see this very flat area. Once you drive up toward where the train trestle is and everything, into that V-cut valley. My brother and I were standing up there today where the train went by. But that's a little bit of a V-cut before you get up above where the train is, and then there's a big U-shape once you get above Silver Plume again. But what is Georgetown sitting on? It's sitting on lots and lots of alluvium. Phil and I were talking about that. They were looking at some places where the alluvium is in Empire Valley, but that alluvium is hundreds of feet thick in the bottom of the valley, but it's the thousands of years that Clear Creek, both branches of Clear Creek, the main branch and the south branch of Clear Creek, has brought down all this rock and boulders and slowly filled up the bottom of the valley and created this great place to build houses unless you dig too far down. And us people I know on Rose Street kind of test. If you go too far down, you hit water pretty fast. And the water table is usually no more than 10 feet below where, at the deepest I think it's about 10 feet below the surface, because the creek lies about 10 to 15 feet down in most areas in the central part of the valley, the historic part of Georgetown. But what it also allows to do, and Dick here that's sitting in front, I remember this conversation as trees that get planted don't have to go very far to get their taproot down to that water table. So for example, he has a huge blue spruce that was planted maybe 25 years ago in his yard Ours were only planted about 30 years ago. You know, we always have people, oh, these must be here for 100 years. No, they're only about 25 years old. I got pictures that Christine gave me early when they first got planted, and um, you know, everything grows pretty fast because it didn't take very long once you get water year round for something to grow, especially conifers. So,
In your part of town.
in my part of town, yes.
That uphill part, not so much.
Yeah. Oops, sorry. Pardon? Yeah. So, but that area where the confluence of the two creeks are, really find that. But kind of just explaining a little bit how the geology creates the environment for people and such. So right at 40 minutes, which is what I thought. Okay, this is a photo that I found online a few years ago before I was going to do the last talk. It's a picture taken in the fall, and you can see South Park over here, Mount Evans, Summit County, and Lake Dillon there, Berthoud Pass. I'm not sure exactly how this is showing up for you. Oh, it shows up really good up there. Awesome. Um, and there's the Georgetown Valley there, and you can see that valley's north, pretty much north and south trending valley, kind of where the glaciers came down, and you can see the major part of the valley, and then it kind of narrows down once you get below Georgetown. But this was taken at about 100,000 feet above the Front Range. There's a gentleman that does these um, weather balloon photos. He attaches a high resolution camera. So, but I'll leave you. Pardon? The camera, when the balloons pop, they comes back down, and all the weather instruments and stuff are on there too. So he has to go searching for them. Um, boy, I wish I have his name. Uh, Mike, Michael, if you want to, I'll try to get you his name. He has a website. Has a lot of really cool stuff. He's done pictures all over around the world, but he's kind of based out of Boulder, so I thought some of his ones that he had at the Front Range were pretty amazing. So leaving you with that great picture of the mountainous area that's more around, and hopefully a better understanding of why you see what you see, and why the mountains are here, why the silver is here, why the big valley with the flat bottom is here. And hopefully next time you're leaving or coming back into Georgetown, you'll see how all this geology has come to play to create this really special place.
Yay.